Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Joseph Clough, and this is episode 882. And in today's session, we are talking about 5 ways that we can start to stop the inner critic. So we can silence it and we can start to be liberated of it in any situation, whether you're going through an interview, whether you're going into a relationship, whether it be in work, business. This little internal dialogue can start to happen where we go, are you good enough? Are you worthy? What if this happens? What if I fail? What will people think of me? And that then starts to create a lot of anxiety. That creates the fear, the dread, the self-sabotage, the sedation from our experience of the things we really want to be doing to live the life that we really, really want to be. That inner critic can really throw a spanner in the works to just stop us being the authentic self. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So number 1, I want you to realize it is so important not to fight it. We do not want to fight the inner critic because we can have so much resentment around it. We can feel angry about it. Like, why am I always like this? Why does this happen to me? And what that tends to do, it builds up so much that we actually start to become more separated from ourselves. Because I've said this in the past, that when you start to hate your issue, you are hating yourself. And you're actually starting to hate the part of you that is running the inner critic. And what is that part? Well, that is the unconscious mind. So if you're full of hate, anger, resentment to the issue, you are also having that negative energy and association to the part of you that runs the issue, right? So yeah, you can hate in a way the behavior, but when you do, you're also hating that aspect of us that runs it, which is the unconscious mind. So number 1, do not do that, because it's only going to make you feel worse. It's only going to make you feel more conflicted because you're battling the unconscious mind, but you're also going to feel more separated. You're not going to be in alignment with your unconscious mind. So rather getting into that, and it's easy to do, by the way, because we do not like the issue itself. We do not like the consequences that actually happen and are birthed into our life if we have this issue. It does stop you living your life. It does stop you not feel good going into that situation or going for your dreams. So I understand it. But at the same time, we need to start to befriend it. Because you're almost like going to that part of you going, look, I don't like the issue, but I still like and love you, right? I love my unconscious mind, because think about it. It does so many great things for us. It is running our heart. It is running our neurology. It is running the fight and flight, the habits, the muscles, the healing of the body, the operation of the body. It runs all of these things. So if we start to dislike it, it's going to start to maybe sabotage other areas. So start to have a mission to befriend your unconscious mind. I always say your unconscious mind is your best friend, your very, very best friend. And if you're having hatred, it's like going to say, if you have a physical best friend beyond your unconscious mind, saying lots of mean things to your unconscious mind. Also, to your friend. You would never do that. But we tend to say it to ourselves and therefore our unconscious mind. So make a number 1 priority to befriend your unconscious mind. You don't have to accept the behavior, but you can accept the part of you that is running it. And what that does is it bridges the gap. It starts you to be in alignment. Your unconscious mind will start listening to you if you start to change your relationship and treat it differently. So now from separation, from conflict, from dislike, hate, and all those things, we're now starting to have a rapport with your unconscious mind. The next step, number 2, is start to notice that inner critic. And it's a weird question because it usually just happens, right? It just kind of spirals out of control. But you got to stop and just notice. Can you identify the inner critic? Can you identify how it operates? When does it happen? Like if you reflect over your past, does it happen in certain situations? Are there certain triggers that are creating the inner critic? Is it every time I see my boss or every time I go for an interview? Is it everywhere? Usually it's going to be in a certain context, but I also understand what we do in one thing, we tend to do in everything. But once you start to notice the trigger, and I'll tell you why there has to be a trigger, is because it can only be triggered by an external reality, right? Like we are operating and communicating with the outside world all the time. So it's like a to and from experience. So notice that trigger. What is the triggers that are setting off the inner critic? I don't believe it's just going to happen for no reason. Now, yeah, there may have some historical data that leads to it, because that's where it's going to maybe come from, but it still bounces back and forth from the external triggers that creates the internal trigger. The other thing is, notice how you just generally experience it when it's been triggered. So does it have a particular sound? Sounds weird. Sometimes when I've worked with clients in the past, that inner critic is not even their own voice. Not because they have multiple personalities, but it's been trained. Sometimes it can be maybe an association or a tone like our mother or our father or a teacher. Sometimes it can have its own tone unrelated to people. But I want you to notice the quality, the tone. Do you identify that critic in some way? Does it exist in a way that you can start to understand it and slow the process down? Like, how do you specifically do it? Because you are doing it. It may be unconscious, but once we start to break it down into that strategy, we're now making it a conscious experience. And then you may want to play. There's a bit advanced, but for example, when I work with people with big phobias, I start to change the experience of the phobia. I interrupt the strategy. I make the thing they're fearful become very, very silly. And therefore, they can never have that association to that, because when you're feeling silly toward it, then how can you have fear? So I wonder if you could start to just consciously change the tone. What if it became into a more interesting voice? Like suddenly that inner critic started to go,
well, you're not good enough. You just don't, like it suddenly gets
a little bit funny, right? When you change the tone of the voice. Maybe you can say it in a laughing way, a joyful way, a loving way. You can change the absolute tone and even the location of that internal, and now we're going to say that internal dialogue, because we want to change it from the critic to just a dialogue, a communication. Maybe you want to be able to add elements to it. Maybe you want to overwhelm it with love. I like to think we can pen things in with love. Like if someone is very, very negative, I want to pen them in with love. I want them to have so much love and kindness sent their way, they cannot operate from that negative state. Because if I can control the state of the person by radiating my energy, therefore they cannot hold that state. It's like someone telling you a joke. Even when you're mad, you will break down and find it maybe a little bit funny, right? If it is funny. So maybe you start to make these little adjustments. These are like changing our modalities, our submodalities technically, the little subsets of how we experience it, the tone, the volume, the sound in general, the location, how you even imagine it in your mind. If you just softened it up, if you started just to kind of play around with it. And what that tends to do, by the way, on a biological level, is you're getting the unconscious mind to have the problem but observe it in a different way, maybe a funny way or just a different way, that it hallucinates it, and therefore it will start to remember that. It will start to think, every time I think of that inner critic, actually, I remember this new experience that the conscious mind has done for me. Now, the third step is to remember, a bit like going back to number one, where we don't want to have hatred or anger. So we can increase number one here is by realizing the inner critic has a positive intention. It is only there to try to protect you. That's the only reason it exists. It is trying to protect you in some way. It may be a case of it doesn't want you to fail, it doesn't want you to go for your dreams in case something may happen. But whatever it is a protective mechanism. So when you start to think about the inner critic from that protective mechanism, so forget about the behavior, consider the intention of what it's trying to do for you, we can then go into number 4, which is in a way becoming more conscious or maybe more stoic of the evidence of the inner critic. Like, if there's an inner critic, well, I want to be able to come up with what is the evidence that that thing could happen? What is the evidence I could fail? And if I do fail, what's it really going to mean? Does it mean the end of my world? The chances are it won't be. It won't be good, but it's not going to be the most terrible thing in the world to ever happen to you. And what that does, it takes the energy, it takes the charge down. And then your unconscious mind goes, well, yeah, it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. And it starts to just reel it in a little bit. But you also may take it another step further, which is to be able to think of all the data or the challenges of that inner critic, which proves it wrong. Like, maybe if you can come up with all the evidence as to why you are enough, all the evidence of how you're capable or how you want to be, and what that would give you, then you're reframing the unconscious mind. You're actually kind of almost negotiating that there's a different way, and there's this counter evidence that if I can find enough of, will allow the inner critic to disappear because it's no longer needed. There's a safer way of being. Even to the point, let's say it is an association of, say, a parental figure growing up, that internal critic. It's not even your voice. This inner critic was not even yours to be had. It was just assumed to be true, maybe when you were very, very young, when you didn't know any better, you didn't have any other evidence to choose a good, positive inner dialogue. And therefore, the unconscious mind may go, well, if it's not mine, or at the very least, I didn't choose it in a way, because I assumed it to be true based on the evidence, and now as an adult I have all this other evidence which counter or contradicts the inner critic, it will start to have to decrease and even disappear. Now the next thing, which is number 5, which kind of goes into number 2, you notice there's little themes here between it when we're saying about changing it. Well, we want to just interrupt the pattern. There's a few ways, doing what I said in number 2, but there's going to be some other great ways as well. If you go ahead and rehearse in your mind exactly how you want to be in that situation, because you've not, on number 2, you slow the process down, you are aware of the triggers and how it operates. Well, if you start to imagine and hallucinate how you want to be in that future situation, and it can take time. You may want to rehearse exactly how you want to be, observing yourself in that image, that's important, or observing yourself in that movie, so you're not associated, you're in a dissociated state. And the reason being, because it takes away negative energy or emotions, and you can see it with more clarity. But when you start to observe yourself, you are pre-teaching your unconscious mind. You are saying that this is the better way. Sometimes with my clients, I've just done one process 10 times in a row, and the biggest issue they experienced for their whole life just disappeared. All by repetitive pre-teaching. And even if it takes like 10 minutes, or because you're doing it 10 times or half hour, it's going to make a huge shift in your life. And then the last aspect of this fifth step, which is going to be a combination of all these things, which is to listen to the Stop the Inner Critic hypnosis session. That's going to be the real powerful option. But there's going to be two parts to this, two elements, because there's going to be a day one, but then the more powerful one is the nighttime one, the sleep hypnosis of stopping the inner critic. And why that is really more powerful, I like to think, is because when you listen to it as you go to sleep, you're handing it over to the unconscious mind, because we become unconscious when we're asleep, right? We're not consciously there on our sleeping awareness. We're just drifting and dreaming. So if you can listen to that real deep, powerful sleep time, nighttime transformation of the inner critic, of stopping the inner critic, I will get you the pre-teaching. I'll give you the interruptions, the strategies of learning, being safer in the future. All those rehearsals. So yeah, do the other things I've said, but if you want to just supercharge it, well, that's what I would do. And the good news is, it's going to be out on the very next episode. And if you are a subscriber to my app, which is, if you haven't got it, if you just listen to this on the YouTube or the podcast, you have so much more to explore about my work. If you go to freehypnosis.app, I have 10x more content that you can dive into, from custom hypnosis sessions, from 4-hour sleep sessions, playlist creation, audio programs, morning meditations. You can repeat, you can download for offline listening, you can favor them so it appears right at the top. All of those things. You will also get the bonus sleep version of this inner critic, Stop the Inner Critic hypnosis session. So I'm super excited for that if you are a part of the app. Either way, you're going to get the free daytime version, because I am here to support as many people, and that's why we've done 882 episodes, this being that one. But I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy by applying the things that I've said. Don't resist, don't have hate, don't have that separation. Reconnect and negotiate. Listen and identify what is the inner critic to start to make changes to it, changing the tone, changing the tempo, changing the association, in other words, because it gets your unconscious mind to go there, right? Like if I say, don't think of a blue tree, you think of a blue tree. So if I go ahead and get my unconscious mind to focus on the different things, it has to go there to try it on and notice what happens when you do. And once again, number 3, the positive intention. It bridges the gap and it starts you that renegotiation. Number 4, we want to discover the evidence. We want to have the counter, or the disruptive evidence of how it's not true, and then the counter evidence of why it is no longer needed. And then fifth is to interrupt the process. Listen, wherever you do the repetitive side of things, and I say repetitive, it's not a bad thing, it's a great thing. I love doing it. I can let go of issues just like that when I do it. But also on top of that, the day and the sleep hypnosis, that's the bonus one for those part of the app at freehypnosis.app. But if you don't have that sleep one, use all the other things I said. It was going to make a huge transformation to the inner critic, so you can speak power into your life. You can have words of affirmation every single day. You can speak new realities into your life because you are supercharged and empowered, all from within, to generate that super effortless, kind, loving internal dialogue. And also, I forgot to say about the app, just thinking about it, it's totally ad-free. You have 0 ads on it. It is all just yours to use in every single way. So 882 episodes, all ad-free, let alone everything else is ad-free. So with that, my friends, I look forward to speaking to you on the next episode, which will be the free hypnosis for the inner critic, the day version, and those who are a part of the app, you'll get the sleep one the very next day. So with that, I look forward to speaking to you on that session. Many thanks and goodbye.